So, famously, Stacey Abrams runs in the race that she loses in Georgia. Stacey Abrams, in losing that race, before and after, signs up a ton of people in Georgia. I think it was like in the hundreds of thousands that she was able to get on the ballots in Georgia. Georgia, for the first time, at the very least in my lifetime that I'm aware of, goes to a Democrat, Joe Biden. Now, this is cathartic. This is massive. Because if Georgia is going to go to Democrats now, and if Texas looked like it's trending towards Democrats, how do Republicans win the presidency if those two states end up going to Democrats? On top of that, if you end up with a system of mail-in ballots that they may enshrine into law, getting around the voter ID laws and everything else that Republicans put into place, what does that mean going forward for Republicans from the standpoint of the presidency? Those are things Republicans are going to have to work out. As for progressives, what does it mean going forward for progressives if liberal corporate Democrats are going to be able to get a lock on Texas and Georgia? What does it mean for you from the standpoint of you have nowhere else to go? Meaning, if you accepted that you have nowhere else to go nonsense when they didn't have Texas and Georgia, what about now? At what point do you ever get the Medicare for all? At what point do you ever get the policies that you want over the finish line when they get that much more comfortable in this notion of we're going to win just because of numbers? That's all. Just the shift, the racial demographic shift in and of itself is for us to get the presidential lock. So we don't have to do that Medicare for all. We don't have to do that increase in wages. We don't have to do that stuff anymore. What does it say for the left? At some point, the left is going to have to grow a spine and grow a backbone. And no, this was not the original intent of this video. But it is true, nonetheless. At some point, the you have nowhere else to go thing is going to have to be confronted. And I got to be honest, for Republicans, they're going to have to confront the fact that they are unpopular in regards to the policies that they're pushing. And that the limited groups that they're pushing out for may not be enough to win them those elections. Democrats, look, from my standpoint, the left needs to come to account. They need to be able to distinguish themselves from Democrats. And in making that distinction, be willing to let them fail if they're not willing to support your interests. It is only then, to the tunes of tens of millions, where you get to this point of people having some level of leverage in the political system. It started to be taken credibly in that political system. Nonetheless, what I wanted to talk about are the races in Georgia. Georgia goes to Democrat, Joe Biden. So now you have two runoff races. What does it mean for the runoffs? Do you remember I showed the video yesterday of the Republican in Florida that basically said he was going to Georgia in order to vote and registered in Georgia and was advising people on how to use his brother's address or some kind of family member's address to basically go and vote illegally in Georgia. Now, think about that for the moment. Why would you need to go that far? It's Georgia, right? Georgia is typically Republican stronghold. That's typically where Republicans are safe. This is safe space for Republicans. But what he recognized, and the very fact that he's saying that gets across, not this year. Under normal circumstances, runoffs typically trend Republican. They just are like a lock. Is that true this year when Georgia presidency, typically a lock, wasn't a lock? Are these races going to be a lock? Right now, Democrats are actually winning those Georgia runoffs in the polling. Not by much. It's a close race. It is Georgia, after all. Like I said, it's trended Republican my entire lifetime, and these runoffs have turned Republican. But this year, Biden won. And what does this foretell for the Senate races when you have the entirety of the state voting for the Senate, just like the entirety of the state voted for president? And in voting for president, they chose Joe Biden. Now, is the fact that Joe Biden won going to get an upswell of Republicans that come out of the closet, that run to the polling locations, and with their last breath, as they inhale COVID fumes, pull the lever for Trump? Pull the lever for Purdue or Loeffler. I don't know. But it's possible that those Democrats that made that vote for one will come out and make the vote for the other, just for the Democrats to take the Senate. So this is going to be an interesting race, and all eyes are going to be on the Georgia race. This is not going to be done until January 5th, I believe, 5th or 9th or 3rd. Let's see. When is the runoff? It's going to be in January. It's the first part of January. I have to check the date to get the date correct. But it's the first part of January that this is going to take place. And look, my prediction early on, I made this prediction months ago, months before the election. Trump would lose. It happened. Democrats keep the House. Happened, even though they lost seats. Democrats take the Senate. Question mark. Now, we still don't know, because depending on this race, that could be true. Now, it'll be 50-50. Don't misunderstand me. But Kamala Harris would end up being the tiebreaker, and she would strut down to the Senate in her shoes and her kicks, and she would bang that gavel as a tiebreaker. She would have a job. So it's possible that Democrats could still take this, believe it or not. And it would depend on these two races. And it's just so happened that these are typically in the Republican safe space, but this year, not so much. So, latest poll, and I'm going to show you a few. This one, Georgia Senate runoff. This one is political polls. RMG Research. Warnock, the Democrat, 48%. Up 2. Loeffler, 46%. I suppose that means she stayed even. But 48, 46, 2 points is not huge. But all things being equal, if you had to pick which side you were on in that equation, it would clearly be in the +2. Ossoff, 48%. Perdue, Republican, 47%. Now, again, very close. He's only up by 1. But again, if you were choosing sides on that equation, of course, you're going to want to be on the other side. I went to Real Clear because I wanted to see averages on this stuff. And in the runoff, Warnock, even in the averages, he's up 2.4. So it seems that, it's somewhat consistent. There is another one right here. Survey USA. Survey USA has Warnock also 52-40, I think that's 5. More substantially. But you get the point. Warnock seems to have a lead that seems to be rather sturdy. He could potentially win that. Loeffler is a crook, by the way. And I'm saying that to say Loeffler moved around the stock options. This was something that hit the news where they got briefed on COVID-19. She goes out and screws around with her stocks. She's massively rich. I think $500 million, if I'm not mistaken, something to that effect. Some obscene amount of money, her and her husband. But crook. So hopefully the crook doesn't win. And one more for Survey USA to get to Ossoff and Perdue. Let's see, Ossoff and Perdue. We have Ossoff at 50 and Perdue at 48. 2 points. So Ossoff, give or take. I mean, it's within the margin of error. And ultimately, you're talking about like 2 points or 1 point for Ossoff. That one is far closer, Ossoff and Perdue. And the other one with Loeffler, incumbent Republican, and her challenger Warnock. That one is a little bit more in Warnock's favor. And again, Loeffler, a lot of publicity as being a crook. So that could hurt her in this race. I'm fascinated by that. Right? This is Georgia. Now, on top of that part, the question that comes up for me is this good for Biden? Think about it for the moment. Is it good for Biden? If Joe Biden is going into this administration and he says, I'm going to knock it out the park, If that's what he's saying in his mind, I'm going to knock it out the park. There's COVID-19, there's fires, there's income inequality. I have all of the right things that FDR had for me to take this mighty bat behind this resolute desk and out the park. If he says that, and then he goes and he browbeats those Democrats to give him what he wants, to get the legislation that he wants, and he uses the trickery of Congress and the mechanisms of Congress and whatnot in order to get his policy through, then maybe he'll be okay if Democrats take the House and Senate. Yes, you're going to have a lot of Democrats that are going to be against them, but Joe Biden, being a corporate Democrat, will be able to give space to corporate Democrats to do some of this nonsense. I mean, to do some of this stuff. And meaning, by nonsense, I mean, under normal circumstances, these guys are pushing policies that are basically Republican policies. Biden is pushing them to do stuff that they don't particularly like and that they would basically consider nonsense. I'm making the point that Biden, because of who he is, he has that space to get them to do things that they don't necessarily consider policies that they wouldn't particularly like. And so maybe if that's where Biden was coming from, if he really did intend that this is going to be a neo-FDR, new FDR, if that's where he was going with this, then I would say him getting a Democratic Senate, great. Perfect. But there's rumors that Rahm Emanuel is up for Secretary, Treasury Secretary, not Treasury Secretary, I'm sorry, Department of Transportation. Rumors. Neil Tanden has definitely brought into the administration, Office of Management Budget. You have all of these, I can't think of the guy's name, but the one that's brought into Secretary of State, the guy has been involved in one war after the next. You basically have people that are from this revolving door of corporate America, oil, gas, just the swamp creatures that you can think of, entrenched into the Biden administration already. Biden can't even name a progressive that he has in his administration because he doesn't have any in his administration. So you have that type of character of an administration, be it Obama 2.0, the worst aspects of that administration, in Biden. He's already said he's going to be antagonistic towards Iran because he's basically said, I have new requirements for any kind of deal. Trump is pushing the country off of a cliff just before Joe Biden gets in office. The Republican Party has said, we'll give $1 billion. That's all we're going to give. $1 trillion. Not even $1 trillion. I think it was like 900 and some billion. The country requires far more than that if you're looking at the economic data that's out, showing families are taking a massive hit. The job numbers are abysmal. You have like 20 to 40 million people, give or take, out of a job. And I know that they're giving off this unemployment number at like 6%. Nonsense. The United States, the way we do our unemployment number, we call a household, we access the person looking for work. If the person says no, we don't include them on the numbers. But fact of the matter is, why don't you include that person? That person may have stopped looking for work. That person may have had somebody who's sick in the home where they've had no choice but to go there. I'm making the point that all of this are people not able to basically work and make an income in the typical way they would do it. And the numbers are showing at this point that that's true. The number of people who are not able to pay their rent, the number of people who are food insecure, all of those numbers are going up. And why wouldn't they go up? The PPP loans and that money went, for the most part, to big business. Meaning the money that was supposed to go to keep those small businesses open didn't go to those small businesses in large. Trump was able to enrich himself off of that. Himself, his organization, and his family. I mean, astonishing. Like $4 million they were able to take from that. But many of the smaller businesses were not. 40% of the businesses on Yelp had to close their doors? I think that was the number. I'm making a point that people have been experiencing radical hurt. Not everybody. The higher incomes have been doing fine. And by higher incomes, I mean higher up your income was, the better off you probably made off. I'm talking about incomes that were not high. I'm talking about the people that were already struggling, already trying to get from point A to point B. Those are the people that basically took the hit. in this. Now, with all of that, Biden steps into it. Now, if he's not going to knock it out the park, if he's not going to be the FDR, if he's not going to be the guy that pushes and controls these Democrats to get these guys to do and go against their nature, to actually push for policies like Medicare for all and push for healthcare, even if it's not Medicare for all, push for a public option, to actually do that, to increase wages, to make legal, and to expunge those records. If he is not willing to do a policy that economically benefits the American public, not in this theatrical, nonsensical way, not in the enrichment of Wall Street and the enrichment of military companies. I'm talking about an economic policy that deals with the American public. If he's not willing to do that, he's going to suffer for it. In the midterms, just like Obama suffered for it. Obama passed Obamacare, yes, and everybody ran from it. They weren't standing there fighting strong and defending. They ran to high heaven. And when you run from something, if you run, they're going to chase you, right? And that's exactly what happened. And what does it look like when somebody is being chased and the guy is, he's running from his own plan? On top of running from the various plans, you also had this thing where Wall Street walks. They crashed the economy. Obama was supposed to be hitting him on the knuckles, but he's the guy that's standing between him and the pitchforks. I guess I'm making the point that in the same way the public wrapped Obama on the knuckles to the point where he basically lost the Senate and the House, the same thing will happen to Joe Biden if he goes that route, especially for something like this when the economic harm and hurt is far more entrenched and deeper than what it was when Obama took office in 2008. I'm making the point that if this is a Democratic Senate, and if with that Democratic Senate, Joe Biden loses the excuse to blame Republicans for intransigence. Oh, the Republicans are stopping me. If it wasn't for these Republicans, I would do this and I would do that. That nonsense. If they lose the Senate, he could do that. Whether people will buy it or not, he could do it. He could say, well, Republicans are stopping me from this. Republicans are stopping me from that. The moment that Obama lost the Senate, when he lost the 51 seat majority, I believe it. Scott, I can't think of his name. Scott something comes in. What is this thing? Oh, the Republicans are stopping me from doing this. Republicans are stopping me from doing that. Joe Biden probably secretly wants these Democrats to lose. So A, he can have that excuse in his pocket. But B, I believe there is stuff that he would get done with Mitch McConnell heading the Senate. And he can have the excuse, look, I wanted to do more, but Mitch, that's all Mitch would do. That's all Mitch would do. He's the Mitch whisperer after all, right? He's the one that was going behind the scenes talking to Mitch McConnell in the Obama White House to get stuff done. He's the Mitch whisperer. Now the Mitch whisperer is president. Is the Mitch whisperer going to get a lot out of Mitch? I think the Mitch whisperer will get out of Mitch what Mitch wants him to get, and not 1 nanosecond or nanocent more. And so what is the stuff that Mitch is going to give Joe Biden? And is that stuff that the American public, especially any idea of the left wants? And not even just any idea of the left. I've given you the stats on where the American public was on this stuff. On election night, Medicare for All had like 78% support. And then you go elimination of student debt. All of these things are popular. All of these things. And I would argue ethically and morally right. And justified now, considering that this public has been hit and raked over the coals over everything that has been taking place, going everything from 2008, where there was not a major recovery, and all of those people lost their houses and hadn't even gotten back up to snuff before they were hit again with COVID and the job losses and the shutting down the government without actually giving financial compensation for shutting it down for the people, or at the very least, when they do give programs, the programs are so rickety and poorly maintained that the money is basically scammed away by the bigger businesses. I'm making the point that there is an argument to be made that Joe Biden may actually prefer not having the Senate and using that as an excuse when he doesn't accomplish the stuff that will be required. I don't believe for a moment that putting the creatures and the dinosaurs and the crooks and the corporate cronies in the positions that Joe Biden has been doing is going to go for that FDR agenda, people or policy. Those are not people in particular positions that would actually indicate a policy that would be this kind of expansive, euphoric government. Nor is that what he ran on. Nor is that what progressives pushed them and held them to account on. So at this point, there is no leverage to push or pull Joe Biden from the left on any of this stuff. Joe Biden is going to be Joe Biden, the same creature you saw him be for the last 47 years in politics. This is going to be a rightward shift from the Obama administration from the standpoint of policy, foreign policy, but also to some degree on domestic. And I don't believe for one moment Joe Biden is going to try to knock it out of the park, which is why my thought is, if this becomes a Democratic Senate, the excuse goes away. And Biden is either going to have to confront not doing what the public expects him to do in regards to the crisis that avails him, not being able to deal with the paltry sum and use that paltry sum to get the economy up and running and get those people from not being hurt by what has been taking place. And in the failure over the course of the 4 years, if indeed he doesn't try to be expansive or try to push and cajole the Democrats to give him what he wants in regards to what he needs after winning the Senate, he will be punished for it because there will be no excuses. This is my greatest fear with the Biden administration. And that's assuming Biden even makes it to the end. You may end up with a Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris was a greatly unliked candidate for various reasons. But the catch becomes she would have to beat whatever Republican. And look, Republicans, whatever you want to think of them, they can win races. And Trump, that wasn't a fluke. Trump won because the hope and change basically wasn't delivered. He won because there was somewhat of a backlash to there being a black president. He won because there were economic woes that this country was dealing with that the Democratic Party pretended just didn't exist and that acted as if the only thing that mattered was this professional managerial class. And frankly, the public saw them as the corporate class. I mean, you have Republican channels like Lou Dobbs talking about Democrats as being in the pocket of big business and whatnot. In fact of the matter is they are. So is the Republican Party, which is why I'm making the point that Lou Dobbs able to even cast that. And he cast it legitimately. It's problematic. How are you supposed to be a party that represents the poor and the workers when people see you as a corporate party, which is to some degree the antagonism of being the party of poor and workers, meaning you can't do both. There is no utopian idea where you can full-throatedly represent the interests of big business and your oligarchs and also represent the interests of the little guy and the poor and the middle class. You represent the interests of the people who are putting money in your pockets. That's the honest reality. You can't do both. You can't dance between the raindrops on that. You have to do one or the other. And it's clear at this point the choice that the Democratic Party has chosen. You have two parties that are captured by corporate interests. They are only tiny variations of one another. These aren't drastic differences. However, I would say that my preference would be for Democrats to win this because I do want this notion of implosion. I do want this notion that these guys need to represent people's interests. And I don't want the excuse. Meaning, I don't want them to have this excuse that, oh, the Republicans were stopping me from doing this and stopping me from doing that. No, I want, by the time the second runoff come around, that if Biden and Democrats haven't necessarily lived up to the modest, paltry things that they actually put out in the primary or during the race, that they're punished and punished severely for it. I don't want the excuse. And my question is it possible that Biden not winning or not having Democrats win the Senate in his best interests? Right now, Obama is campaigning for both Warnock and Ossoff. And apparently is going to be doing a virtual meeting and greet form or a virtual rally form. But we will see. I mean, it's very possible that Democrats this year can take the Senate. and can take it with the state of Georgia. That is mind-blowing to me. Very mind-blowing to me. And keep in mind, though, even in Georgia, when asked about Medicare for all, the majority of Democrats was on board for Medicare for all, even though the majority of Democrats chose Joe Biden. So I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, and I am going to say subscribe. Let's see. Make sure you're subscribed, guys. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you can catch the shows, and make sure you're subscribed. I think Google has been dropping people off the channel. I'm not sure if that's because of the radio show or if that's because of my own show. I have no idea. But that's what I think is taking place. African82. Thank you, African82. Leave a comment. I love it when people leave their comments. All right, I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share, and I am going to say subscribe. Thanks all.